The knock on my door wasn't a polite tap, it was the kind of pounding that rattles your bones and makes your stomach drop before you even know why. I opened it to find a stranger holding a clipboard and wearing an apologetic smile. Behind him, a moving truck idled in my driveway. "Sir," he began, "the new owners are here to move in." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "New owners?" I asked. "I've lived here 35 years. This is my home." He looked down at his papers, almost embarrassed. "The HOA approved the sale last month. The deed has already been transferred." That's when I saw her, Karen, the self-appointed queen of our neighborhood HOA, standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, smirking like she'd just won a war. My chest tightened. I stepped outside and confronted her. "What did you do?" I demanded. "Oh, John," she said with a fake sweetness, "it's nothing personal. You were behind on some minor compliance fees, and the board voted to auction the property. You should have read the notices." I could feel the blood rushing to my face. My hands shook, not from fear, but from pure disbelief. I'd served this state for decades. I'd shaken hands with presidents, signed laws, and fought for people's rights. And now this petty power grab, was threatening to throw me out of my own home. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. She didn't know who I was. She didn't realize the man she just blindsided with her smug HOA maneuver was the sitting governor of this state. And as she turned her back and walked toward her golf cart, tossing a "good luck finding a new place" over her shoulder, I felt something inside me click. If she thought this was over, she had no idea who she was dealing with. But before I could even take the first step toward stopping her, the moving crew started hauling boxes out of my house, and one of them shouted that they'd found something in the attic. Something that stopped everyone in their tracks. I've lived in Maple Ridge Estates for almost my entire adult life. Back in the late 80s, it was just a patch of undeveloped land and a dream my late wife, Linda, and I shared. We scraped together every penny to build our home here, a little two-story colonial with white siding and a wraparound porch that looked out over the lake. We were one of the first families to move in, back when the Homeowners Association was just a couple of friendly neighbors who organized holiday parties and helped fix fences. But over the years, things changed. The HOA became less about community and more about control. Rules stacked up like bricks in a wall: what color your shutters could be, how tall your grass was allowed to grow, even the type of flowers you could plant. Linda and I always played along, though we quietly rolled our eyes at some of the more ridiculous rules. After Linda passed 10 years ago, the house became my anchor. Every creak in the floorboards, every dent in the old kitchen table held a memory. I wasn't always home, being governor keeps you on the road, but every time I returned, the house felt like a piece of my wife was still there, waiting. Karen moved in about 6 years ago. She was the kind of neighbor who introduced herself not with a handshake, but with a copy of the HOA bylaws. She quickly became president, and it didn't take long for her to start throwing her weight around. Still, I paid my dues. Kept my lawn neat. Complied with her notices, even when they were absurd. That's why, when she claimed I was behind on compliance fees, I knew something was off. The less extreme run-ins with her had been annoying, but never dangerous. She once sent me a letter demanding I repaint my porch because the white had faded to cream. Another time, she fined me for having a political yard sign up 2 days past the allowed period, despite it being my own campaign sign. But about a month ago, while I was at the state capitol, I'd noticed a couple of HOA board members taking pictures of my house. I thought it was just one of Karen's document everything routines. I had no idea it was the beginning of something much bigger. When I came home from a long week of legislative sessions, there was an envelope in my mailbox marked "Urgent HOA Business." Inside was a letter stating that, due to unpaid compliance violations, my property was scheduled for auction in 3 weeks. It was dated nearly a month prior. I never received the earlier notices they claimed to have sent. I called Karen immediately, but she didn't answer. I emailed. No reply. I even drove to her house. She opened the door just far enough to tell me, "Everything's already in motion," before slamming it shut. I figured it was a bluff. After all, who sells a man's home over a few $100s in supposed fines? I was wrong. And now here I was, standing in my front yard as strangers carried my life out in cardboard boxes, and Karen acted like it was just another Tuesday. The real gut punch came when that moving crew worker emerged from my attic. His face was pale, and he held something in his hands like it was too important, or too dangerous, to be casual about. Karen saw it too. Her smug smile faltered for the first time. "What is that?" she asked, stepping forward. The man didn't answer. He just looked at me, then at her, and said, "Sir, you'd better see this." He handed me a weathered, leather-bound folder, the edges fraying from decades of storage. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized it immediately. It was Linda's. She'd kept everything that mattered in this folder: old letters, personal keepsakes, and, most importantly, the original deed to our home. But there was something else tucked inside. Something I didn't even know existed. A single, signed affidavit, dated over 35 years ago, stating that the land our house was built on had a governor's preservation exemption. That meant, in plain terms, no homeowners association could legally claim or sell it. The paper bore the seal of the state itself, signed by a governor from decades past. It was airtight. Karen's face went pale. Her eyes darted from the document to me, clearly trying to process what this meant. "Where did you get that?" she demanded. "It's mine," I said slowly, my voice low but steady. "Always has been." The moving crew hesitated, looking unsure if they should keep unloading my home. But before I could take another breath, Karen snatched the paper right out of my hands. "Hey!" I stepped forward, but she spun on her heel and marched to her golf cart. "You think this changes anything?" she snapped. "The board's decision is final. You're out." And just like that, she was gone, the document with her. That was the moment I realized Karen wasn't just drunk on power. She was willing to destroy evidence to get her way. The days leading up to that moment had been a strange mix of quiet and tension. After I received the auction notice letter, I tried to keep calm. I'd been through political storms far worse than an HOA spat, and my plan was to talk it out with the board members before things escalated. But the problem was, they wouldn't meet with me. I called emergency meetings, sent certified letters, even offered to pay the supposed fines in full just to get them off my back. Every attempt was met with silence or curt rejections. It was almost as if they were avoiding me on purpose. Then came the neighborhood whispers. People I'd known for years started avoiding eye contact. Conversations stopped when I walked by. My neighbor, Joe, who usually offered me coffee when I was out jogging, wouldn't even wave anymore. It hurt more than I'd like to admit. I'd gone to bat for this community more times than I could count. Gotten them funding for a new park, repaired roads, pushed for local business grants. And now, because of Karen, they saw me as some kind of problem child who couldn't follow the rules. But then, there were moments that reminded me not everyone had turned against me. One evening, as I was putting my trash out, a young couple from down the block stopped their car in front of my house. The wife, Sarah, leaned out the window. "Governor, we heard what Karen's saying," she whispered, glancing around. "We know it's not true. She's been telling people you're dangerous to the neighborhood. That's why no one will talk to you." Dangerous? That was a new one. Sarah's husband added, "She told the board you've been using the house for political gain. Said you were letting strangers stay here to influence votes." I almost laughed. The only people who'd stayed in my house recently were my grandkids. That night, I sat on my porch long after the sun went down, thinking about how absurd this all was. But I didn't yet understand just how far Karen was willing to take it. Because 2 mornings later, before dawn, I woke to the sound of an engine rumbling outside. I stepped out to see Karen, the entire HOA board, and a county clerk standing in my driveway. They had a stack of papers, a locksmith, and a smirk that told me they'd been planning this for weeks. And in the beam of the locksmith's flashlight, I saw it, the padlock snapping shut on my front door as they announced I had until noon to be out. That was the day the moving trucks came. That was the moment the attic discovery stopped everything. And now, as Karen sped away with my late wife's folder and the exemption document inside, I knew 2 things for certain. 1, she'd just committed theft in front of witnesses. And 2, if I didn't act fast, she was going to make sure that paper, and my legal right to my home, vanished forever. Which is why, 10 minutes later, I was in my truck, following her golf cart down Maple Ridge Drive, headlights off, my pulse pounding. Because if she thought she could outrun me, she was dead wrong. Karen's golf cart zipped down the road like she was in some suburban Grand Prix, swerving around corners and taking side streets to avoid being followed. But she didn't know these roads like I did. I'd been driving them since before she even moved in. I kept my truck back far enough so she wouldn't notice the headlights, but close enough that I could follow her every turn. She finally pulled into the back entrance of the HOA clubhouse, a place that was always locked after 9 p.m. The gate was open tonight, though, which meant she'd planned this. She parked, grabbed the leather folder, and slipped inside. I killed my engine, got out, and crept toward the side of the building. Through the tinted windows, I could see her pacing in the boardroom. She was on the phone, her voice just loud enough for me to catch pieces of it. Yes, I have it. No, he doesn't know where it is now. Don't worry, it'll be gone by morning. Yes, the shredder's here. The shredder. She was planning to destroy it tonight. I took a step closer, my foot crunching on loose gravel. She stopped pacing and turned toward the window. I ducked back, pressing myself against the wall. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then, from somewhere behind me, a flashlight beam swept across the ground. "Who's there?" a voice barked. It was one of the HOA's hired security guards, ex-police, and still built like a brick wall. I didn't have time to explain. I bolted for the side door. "Hey! Stop!" I shoved the door open and slipped inside. Karen was at the shredder, feeding in the first sheet of the exemption document. "Karen!" I shouted. She froze. Then she smiled, slow, deliberate, smug. "You really think anyone's going to believe you? The deed's gone. The sale's done. You're finished." I moved toward her, but she pressed the on button and the shredder roared to life. The weeks before this all came to a head had been a slow build toward disaster. While I'd been dealing with Karen's bogus claims, I'd also been trying to keep my focus on my actual job. Being governor isn't something you can half do. There were education bills, disaster relief plans, infrastructure projects, all the things I'd sworn to prioritize when I was elected. But no matter how much I buried myself in work, the thought of losing my home of 35 years kept creeping in like a shadow at the edge of my vision. I started digging through my own records, trying to find proof that the fines Karen claimed I owed were fake. I found receipts for every HOA payment going back 10 years, all marked, paid in full. I even found old emails from previous board presidents thanking me for being a model homeowner. None of it mattered. The board wouldn't look at my evidence. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized Karen had a pattern. She'd done this before, quietly pushing out older residents and selling their homes at auction for suspiciously low prices. Every time, the buyers were friends of hers or related to other board members. It was a racket, hidden under the cover of bylaws and community standards. It made my stomach turn. Still, I didn't want to go nuclear. Not yet. I'd built my career on diplomacy, on solving problems without blowing everything up. But that night, in the clubhouse, watching her try to shred the one thing that could stop her, all of that restraint burned away. I lunged forward. She yanked the paper back, ripping it in half before I could grab it. Half of the exemption document slid into the shredder, disappearing in seconds. The other half? I got to it first. I snatched it from her hand and stuffed it into my jacket pocket. Her face went red. "You don't scare me," she hissed. But before I could reply, the security guard stormed in, blocking the door. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Karen pointed at me. "Trespassing. He's trying to steal HOA property." The guard stepped toward me, his hand hovering near his belt. And that's when I realized, if I didn't get out of here right now, I was going to be the one in handcuffs before the night was over. The guard's boots pounded against the hardwood floor as he closed the distance. I took one step back, my eyes darting between him and Karen, who was already putting on her best, helpless victim act. She broke into the clubhouse. Karen cried. "Arrest him." The guard's voice was firm. "Sir, put your hands where I can see them." But I wasn't about to hand myself over to Karen's personal muscle. My instincts kicked in, the same instincts that had kept me alive in politics, and before that, in a few far more dangerous jobs. "I have evidence of a felony," I said sharply, keeping my tone calm but loud enough to echo through the room. "You lay one hand on me, and you'll be part of it." The guard hesitated, but only for a moment. That was all I needed. I sidestepped him, darted toward the exit, and burst out into the cool night air. My truck was parked across the lot, but before I could reach it, I heard Karen yelling behind me. "Stop him. He has stolen property." One of the other board members, a lanky man in a sweater vest, appeared out of nowhere, trying to block my path. I feinted left, cut right, and slipped past him, my pulse roaring in my ears. I slammed the truck door, jammed the key into the ignition, and tore out of the lot. In my jacket pocket, the half of the exemption document crinkled like a secret waiting to be unleashed. The following day, the HOA board sent out a community alert email to every resident. It accused me, by name, of breaking into the clubhouse, attempting to steal confidential documents, and behaving in a threatening manner toward the HOA president. It was Karen's masterpiece of spin. By noon, my phone was blowing up. Local reporters were calling for comment, political rivals were seizing the opportunity to question my judgment, and even some of my friends were asking what on earth I was thinking. I gave the same answer to everyone: this isn't about me, it's about corruption. Privately, though, I knew the damage was already being done. Still, I wasn't about to let Karen win. That afternoon, I met with my legal counsel, a sharp-witted attorney named Patrick who'd been with me since my first mayoral campaign. He studied the half document I'd rescued and leaned back in his chair. "This is enough to prove the exemption existed," he said. "But without the other half, they'll claim it's incomplete and dismiss it." "So we get the other half," I said. Patrick smirked. "And how exactly do you plan to do that? Break in again?" I didn't answer. Because truth be told, I already had a plan forming in my mind, a way to get into the clubhouse legally. The trick would be getting Karen out of it long enough for me to search. 2 nights later, the perfect opportunity landed in my lap. A local charity gala, a big one, was being held downtown. I knew Karen had tickets. She'd been bragging about it for weeks. More importantly, it was the kind of event she wouldn't dare miss, because it was crawling with the kind of wealthy donors she liked to impress. The plan was simple: wait until she was gone, then walk into the clubhouse as an invited guest for a scheduled after-hours meeting I'd arranged with one of the few board members still willing to talk to me. But before I could put the plan into motion, something unexpected happened. The morning of the gala, as I was leaving the Capitol building, a black SUV pulled up alongside me. The tinted window rolled down, and inside sat a man I hadn't seen in years, an old political rival with a grin like a shark. "I hear you're having some housing troubles," he said. "Word is, the HOA's about to bury you." I didn't reply. Then he leaned in, lowering his voice. "You should know. Karen's not working alone. She's got someone on the county zoning board feeding her everything she needs. And they're coming for more than just your house." I froze, my mind spinning. Before I could ask what he meant, the SUV pulled away, leaving nothing but the smell of exhaust, and a whole new level of danger hanging over my head. The SUV's taillights vanished into the traffic, but his words clung to me like a cold fog. "They're coming for more than just your house." By the time I got back into my truck, my phone was already buzzing with messages from Patrick. He'd dug up something in the county records. I answered on speaker as I drove. "You're not going to like this," Patrick said. I pulled every file I could find on Maple Ridge Estates. There's been a sudden zoning reassessment, one that would let the HOA seize multiple properties under the guise of redevelopment. Yours is just the first. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "How many homes are we talking?" 10, maybe 12, mostly older residents. People who wouldn't fight back, or who don't have the resources to. That's when it clicked. My eviction wasn't personal. It was strategic. They wanted to turn the entire lakeside stretch into luxury rentals. My home was simply the crown jewel in their plan. And if they thought I was going to let them steamroll my neighbors the way they tried to steamroll me, they were dead wrong. That night was the gala, and it couldn't have come at a better time. If Karen was their queen, then taking her out of the game, if only for a few hours, would give me my shot at the other half of that exemption document. I dressed in an unassuming gray suit and parked a block away from the clubhouse. Through the blinds, I could see the place was nearly empty. The board's office lights were off, the meeting hall dark. Only the front desk lamp was on, manned by a single bored-looking receptionist. I walked in like I owned the place. "Evening," I said casually. "I'm here for the after-hours meeting with board member Collins." She glanced at her schedule, nodded, and waved me through. The lie worked. Inside the boardroom, I closed the door and began my search. Filing cabinets, desk drawers, even the shredder bin, nothing. I was starting to think Karen had stashed the other half somewhere off-site. Then I noticed the vent cover near the floor behind her desk. The screws were loose, like someone had been in there recently. I crouched down, pulled the cover free, and reached inside. My fingers brushed against paper. When I pulled it out, my pulse spiked. It was the other half of the exemption document. Torn cleanly where Karen had ripped it. Together, the pieces formed the complete, signed, state-sealed proof that the HOA had no right to my property. I slipped it into my jacket just as footsteps echoed in the hall. The door opened. It wasn't the receptionist. It was Karen. She was supposed to be at the gala, dressed in sequins and networking with donors. Instead, she stood in the doorway wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, her eyes locked on me like a predator spotting prey. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" she said, stepping inside and shutting the door behind her. "I could say the same to you," I replied, keeping my voice even. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You think a piece of paper is going to save you? The board already voted. The county's on our side. All of this," she swept her arm toward the window, where the lake glistened in the moonlight, "is going to be ours." "Not if I have anything to say about it," I shot back. Karen chuckled. "Oh, Governor, you have no idea what's coming next." And then she stepped aside. The door opened again, and two men in dark suits walked in. I recognized them instantly, not board members, not HOA security, but county officials. The ones who had the power to shut me down legally before I could even take my case public. One of them spoke, his tone flat. "We're here to serve you with a court order. Effective immediately, you are barred from entering this property or contacting the HOA board. Any violation will result in your arrest." Karen's smile widened as she folded her arms. "Guess you won't be getting the chance to fight this after all." But as the county official handed me the order, my phone buzzed, and when I saw the name on the screen, I knew the entire game had just changed. The name flashing across my phone made me pause, even with the county official standing right there. It was the Attorney General. My friend of 20 years, a man who owed me more than one favor. I answered without hesitation. "Tom, you're calling at the perfect time." His voice was brisk, urgent. "John, I just got wind of what's happening in Maple Ridge. I've opened an official investigation into your HOA. Racketeering, fraud, conspiracy, the works. And I need you to stall them for exactly 10 minutes. A grin tugged at the corner of my mouth. I glanced at Karen, who was already smirking like she'd won. "Copy that," I said, and hung up. I slipped the court order into my pocket, looked at the two county officials, and said, "Gentlemen, I respect the law. But you might want to be careful about which side of it you're standing on." Karen rolled her eyes. "Spare us the speech, Governor. You've lost." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Karen, in about 9 minutes, the Attorney General's office is going to be here. They're bringing state troopers, auditors, and a stack of warrants with your name on them. You might want to start practicing your mugshot smile." Her smirk faltered. "Just a little." The county officials shifted uncomfortably. "What are you talking about?" one asked. I shrugged. "You'll see." 8 minutes later, the sound of sirens sliced through the quiet streets of Maple Ridge Estates. Red and blue lights lit up the clubhouse windows. Karen's face went pale as 3 state trooper SUVs rolled into the parking lot, followed by a van marked, "State Attorney General, Investigations Unit." The door burst open, and in strode Tom himself, flanked by investigators in jackets stamped with bold yellow letters. "Karen Myers?" Tom's voice boomed. "You're under investigation for fraud, illegal property seizures, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy to commit racketeering." Karen tried to play it cool. "This is a mistake. I run a lawful." "Save it for court," Tom cut in. 2 troopers moved in, cuffing her wrists before she could finish. The county officials stepped back, looking like they wished they could vanish into the carpet. Tom turned to me. "John, I believe you have something that belongs in evidence." I pulled the 2 halves of the exemption document from my jacket and handed them over. Proof my property was never under HOA control. Tom looked at it, nodded, and passed it to an investigator. "We'll make sure this goes exactly where it needs to." Karen was being led out in cuffs, shouting over her shoulder. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." I followed her out, stepping onto the clubhouse porch. The entire neighborhood had gathered outside, drawn by the sirens. Faces I hadn't seen in weeks, neighbors who'd avoided me, friends who'd gone quiet, now stared wide-eyed as Karen was shoved into the back of a cruiser. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Is that the governor?" Word spread like wildfire. By the time I reached my driveway, a dozen people were thanking me, apologizing for believing Karen's lies. One older man shook my hand and said, "You didn't just save your house. You saved ours, too." Over the next few weeks, the investigation tore through the HOA like a storm. Board members resigned left and right, county officials scrambled to distance themselves, and the fraudulent redevelopment plan was scrapped entirely. When it was all over, the Attorney General himself held a press conference, on my front lawn. Cameras flashed as he read the charges and praised the courage of one resident to stand up to corruption. And that's when I decided to make my own statement. I stepped up to the microphone and looked straight into the cameras. This isn't just my home, it's my life's memories, my late wife's legacy, and part of this community's heart. And let this be a message to anyone who thinks they can abuse power for personal gain, not on my watch. The crowd erupted in cheers. That night, as I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, the lake shimmering under the moonlight, I thought about everything that had happened. Karen's greed, the fear in my neighbor's eyes, the way she'd underestimated me. She'd sold my home out from under me without knowing the man she was crossing. Now she knew. And as far as I was concerned, justice had been served, governor style.